Alright, Buddha, let's talk about something serious for a second here because we got butterscotch and we got a lot going on. Today, we are going to discuss, oh my god, the purring. I don't know if that's being picked up, but the purring. We are going to discuss how to stop watching porn. Not joking. Now, porn. Love porn. No problem with porn. But when you become addicted to anything in your life, it starts to control your life. And I will be the first to admit that I, in my past, have watched copious amounts of porn. Now, if that triggers you and you would rather not talk about this, then please click off the video. Go and spend your time doing something beneficial to you. Whereas, for me, this is something that I actually really feel like I need to talk about. And I need to talk about this before I talk myself out of talking about this. So, it's a fact of our society that there is a massive sexualization of all kinds of different aspects of our world. And porn is one of those things that for some reason we don't talk about, but everyone seems to do, as far as I know. I mean, I haven't specifically polled every single human being. But Canadian male living in the year 2020, I have watched a fair amount of porn. Now, details aside, that's not really what this is about. What I would rather talk about is actually how do you kick a habit, and I'm using porn as an example because it's close to the heart. It's not very close to the heart, but it's unfortunately close to the heart. Anyways, how do you kick a habit that you don't see as a problem? You can't. Step one, you can't stop doing something if you don't want to. That lines up with all the other beliefs that we've talked about in these videos. And step two, if you don't see it as a problem, even if you want to do something about it, you're not going to do anything about it. Now, for the last year on this journey of spirituality and self-discovery and actualization, etc., porn's been one of those things kind of nagging me in the back of my head. And it's one of those things that kind of creates a default, it's a set point. And so I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to binge this because there's other areas of my life that I'm not willing to face and deal with and do work on. And that's okay. If that's where you're at right now, the fact that you're watching this video is extremely powerful. Now, once you kind of have that realization and you're on that path, promise that you're on that path if you're watching this kind of content, my content, someone else's content, doesn't freaking matter. If you're consuming this kind of content and wanting to improve this, then you're on the path. No matter where you are right now, you are on the path of that self-actualization. And let me just get one thing straight right out the gate here. This video is probably going to come out close to mid to late October 2020. And No Vap November, or No Nut November, or whatever you want to call it, is just around the corner. I think that's kind of an interesting concept, a fun thing to go into, and No Vap definitely has its entire community. But don't do both at the same time, the first time, right away out the gate, because you'll probably go nuts, literally. This applies to men and women too, by the way. This is not just specifically men watching porn, although I could probably confidently say that the bias is skewed towards male audience in this realm. Although women have their vices too. We're all human at the end of the day. Well, for the most part. What has helped me, for the biggest part here, is realizing that the more and more you consume something, and again, pornography being the topic of today's discussion, the more and more you consume it, the more, let's call it darker or more intense or hardcore you go into that product, right? So you go down these different rabbit holes, and the way that things are laid out in the internet is you can go down different rabbit holes that lead you to different categories and aspects of stuff. And you're going to eventually get to a point where you're like, I don't even like this, but I want to watch it. And if you get to that point, wherever that point is, again, I'm not talking details here. This is not a rated R conversation. This is something that should actually be discussed in like freaking grade school as far as I'm concerned. Once you get to a category that you actually don't enjoy, but you feel almost turned on by it because you're just so brain dead, then you get to a point where you have like the switching point where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And you eventually decide that you're not going to do it. Going down? Okay, you stop bugging me now? So once you get to that point, you have a decision to make. And for me, the decision was actually pretty easy. I was like, well, I'm going to back off. I'm going to reduce the intensity before I try to reduce the frequency, for example. So you reduce the intensity of the content that you're watching, and you make it less visceral and less out there, less different from what would normally be an interaction that you would have if you were of the age of having interactions with people and you're of that guise. And as myself, being a straight white male, I brought myself to the most specific stuff that would represent my perspective in those sorts of interactions in a loving sense, from all the way to one side back to a more suitable sense for something that I would actually experience, right? So you're bringing you're renormalizing your brain slightly. And then even to a step further, I completely stopped watching porn, but then stepped back from having like interactive content with two people to just singular content with one person of a female nature, and enjoying to watch that as that like a stepping stone into more of being like, I'm not interested in consuming this at all. All right, so I backed off of the intensity, went back to stuff that would be more likely or and then even possible to happen in my real day-to-day life to myself. And then I went to a point where I was actually just consuming women. Now, say what you want about that, but this is a topic about porn, so there's levels of that. And once I got to that point, I was like, okay, well, this is getting boring. So instead of going back down the rabbit hole into porn brain, I thought, well, why don't I just kick out completely and try to use my own mind and to enjoy myself and my thoughts instead of consuming that screen sucking, right? So that's a tactic that I've used, and I think that can be applied to anything that you're trying to wean yourself off of, is reducing the severity, bringing it back down to a normalcy. And then I don't feel triggered now if I see something or if I feel like consuming something in a smaller doses. I don't feel as triggered as I would about going into larger doses of stuff and then going straight to specific content. And I think that it's actually healthy to have nudity in our world and to have content in our world that's normalized, but not down a super dark, crazy rabbit hole. So kind of getting this back on track, what I'm saying is I have prepared myself for the self-control through resensitizing my brain to normalcy of content. And throughout all this, I still managed to have brief interactions with people and quasi-relationships somewhat, but it was getting to a point where that was seeming less and less normal and harder to accomplish actually like meeting and being with people. And that's kind of the catalyst that kicked it for me to make it just like, nah, I'm done with this. I'm ready to move on to a stage in my life where I'm sharing it with another human being and we having a beautiful soul connection. And that's going to involve intimacy, but also involve brain connection and an actual understanding and a love together. And I can't do that if all I want to do is watch things on the internet, right? So again, to bring it back to full circle to what we're talking about here, you got to want to do it. You're not going to do it if you don't want to do it. But the fact that you're watching this content means that you even subconsciously do want to do it. And it took me probably about a year about wanting to do it before I actually started really achieving some milestones and some small victories and some understandings here. And it's life-changing. It's huge. It's a part of this journey that we're on through the spiritual realms. It's a part of this existence on this planet. So I don't think that these types of topics should be taboo, because nothing inherently is wrong with expressing ourselves. But when you express yourself in a very specific, narrow-minded way and you're not open to the other aspects of that, it becomes an addiction. And an addiction can control your life. So instead, I've flipped it and I've made my addiction, because we're all addicted to something, but I've made my addiction, you guys, how I can provide content and create, instead of just consume garbage all day that doesn't actually contribute to society and to my life. what I'm doing now is I'm producing that content and interacting with content creators and creation that's already out there that's of spiritual and beautiful nature, so that's my new obsession, my new love. So before I go on too much of a rant, don't be too hard on yourself. It doesn't help. You just feel the guilt, you just feel the negativity. Screw that. Be nice to yourself, but recognize that you've got a process to go through. And again, if you're watching this content, you're already on that process. You can choose to bury your head in the sand about it, but that's just going to delay the inevitable. And that inevitable is your understanding. And whether that's this lifetime or another, it's going to happen and it's going to be a beautiful thing. So comment down below if you can relate to this in any way. I know it's kind of a heavy subject and we don't talk about these often, but I want to kind of normalize that. And I'm very happy that I had this discussion with you guys. It actually feels really freaking good to get that off my chest. Comment down below if you've been through something similar or are going through it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Get that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification, and we're going to keep going through this all together. Peace.